So once you've installed Oracle VirtualBox, your screen will look similar to this. You probably won't have these machines installed. So the first thing we have to do is install our new Linux machine into our VirtualBox. But before we do that, we have to download our virtual machine. So I wanted to show you that real quick. So I've already brought up the website here. This is kali.org. I went to downloads, and here I have a list of downloads. Now, on your computer, you're going to want to make sure you download the correct version for your architecture. So I'm going to download the 64-bit since I have a 64-bit system that I'm using here, but you may have a 32-bit system. So if you have a 32-bit system, be sure to use the 32-bit version. You could download the full version, which is 2.6 gigs. I'm going to download the light version because I don't want to wait that long to download the full one. And most of the tools that I need are going to be in this light version. So I'm going to choose this one. In order to download it, you have two options. You can download the ISO direct, or you can download a torrent. If you're familiar with BitTorrent, you know how to use that. By all means, you can download with a BitTorrent. If not, feel free to go ahead and use the ISO link. Also, take note of the SHA-1 hash over here. We're going to take a look at this later on in a few units. We're going to talk about hashing and how this works, and we're going to reference this later on. So we'll come back to this, but I just wanted to point it out so we can look at that later. So for right now, you're going to click on the ISO. You're going to download it. So I'm just going to click on Save File for mine. I'm using Firefox, so it's going to take a little while for mine to download. You can see here it's telling me about 17 minutes. So then we come back to the video once you've completed your download. So as you can see, my download is now complete. So if I click on my little folder for my downloads, I should be able to find my, my downloaded file. So here it is right here. I'm going to move this to a place that I'm going to run it from. So I'm going to cut it from here. I created a folder on my system called Temple 5209. So I'm going to paste it in there. So now I've got that file in here. So now I know where my ISO is, and I'm going to use that ISO to build my virtual machine. So let me minimize these. We're going to get rid of this. Back to VirtualBox. I'm going to click on the new icon up here. I'm going to give it a name. I'm just going to call it 5209. And for the operating system type, I'm going to choose Linux, and I'm going to pick Linux 2.6 64-bit. I'm going to click Next. So now I have to tell it how much memory I want it to use. I'm going to pick 1024, so about a gig of memory. This will show you how much memory you have on your computer. The minimum is the minimum amount that you could set, which you, of course, wouldn't want to do. And then you would set this little slider somewhere in between. You don't want to give it too much, because if you give it too much memory, it's going to take too much memory from your computer. Kali Linux is not going to require a whole lot of memory for the things that we're going to do, but you can always change this later on. So this isn't set in stone. You can set this up, and later on you can change it to something else. I'm going to click Next. I'm going to do Create a Virtual Hard Drive Now. Click Create. I'm going to choose the format. If you use the VDI format or VirtualBox disk format, it'll work with VirtualBox. You could also do VMware. So there's a VMware format or virtual machine disk. This will work with VMware. I'm just going to keep mine as VDI because I don't plan on migrating this to VMware in the future. But if you think you might want to try VM workstation or something like that, you can certainly use the second option. Functionally, they'll work the same for you, though, in VirtualBox. As far as the hard drive size, I'm going to just do dynamically allocated. So it'll only use the disk drive will only be the size that I need. If you set it to a fixed size, it'll create a file that's the size of your hard drive when you create the machine, even though you may not need all that space. It usually runs a little faster when you use fixed size, but you also have to use all that space right from the beginning, even though you may not need it. All right, so that's it. So I'm now ready to install my virtual machine. I'm going to hit Create. So that creates my virtual machine. So the virtual machine is now created, but I also have to configure some settings before I can run it. So I'm going to click on Settings. This dialog box comes up. The important one here that I need to set is, first of all, when I go to storage, I need to mount that ISO that I downloaded. So when we downloaded that ISO image of Kali Linux, I have to tell this virtual machine to use it. So I'm going to click the button to add a new disk. I'm going to click on Choose Disk. And you can see here I've already got a CentOS in here, but I'm going to choose the one that I downloaded earlier. So here's that Kali Linux ISO that I downloaded earlier in my Temple 5209 folder. I'm going to click on Open. All right, so there it is. So it should boot from this. So hopefully when it starts up, it's going to boot from this first disk image. And when it installs, it would install onto this empty drive that we've created down here. This one right now, this is our actual CD-ROM drive that's on my computer, but I don't have anything in there. But if you happen to have an ISO that was burned onto a CD or a DVD and you insert that into your drive, you can install from that just like you would install on any other computer. So I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to try powering up this machine, and let's see if it starts that with using that ISO. There we go. So I can either run it live or I can install it. I'm going to choose to install it. That way it's always here. I don't have to use it off of the live version or off the ISO. And anything that I do is going to be saved if I install it. If you just run it live, you won't be saving any of the work that you do in it. So I'm going to click on, you can either do the regular install or the graphic install. I'm just going to click on install. And then this is much like installing any other operating system. So it's going to walk you through some steps. So I'm going to choose English, United States, American English. All that stuff is pretty obvious. You'll have to wait for things to download, or I'm sorry, to set up. All right, it's still running. Just while this is running, if your mouse gets stuck in the virtual machine, sometimes you have to click Control-Alt at the same time to pull your mouse outside the virtual machine. All right, so I have to give it a host name. I'm just going to make something up. And my domain name, again, I'm just going to make something up. You can use whatever you like. Since we're not on the same network together, we don't have to coordinate here. When you set the root password, make sure you remember what it is. If you forget what it is, it's going to ruin your day. So make sure you don't forget. All right, my time zone is Eastern. You can see this is pretty straightforward. It's just going to ask you a bunch of questions, and you keep hitting next, just like any other installer. I'm just going to use my entire disk to set up my virtual machine. Select my virtual disk from VirtualBox. You can see it's 8.6 gigs because that's how big I told it to make my virtual disk. I'm going to put all my files in one partition, which is fine. I'm going to tell it to write the changes. You have to toggle over to yes for this to work. By default, it's on no. So I'm going to toggle over to yes using my arrow key. All right, it's copying everything to disk. This is going to take some time. All right, so I'm going to, excuse me, I'm going to say yes on this screen. And you can put in a proxy, but I'm just going to leave it blank for none, for no proxy. All right, it's configuring apt, which is a package manager. If you're not familiar with package managers, there's several of them available, but apt-get is the one that's the default in Debian-based Linux distros. And in Red Hat, they use RPM or a couple other different options. But this is basically just setting it up. This is if we wanted to do updates. And we should be almost done. Okay, my installation is completed, so I'm going to click Continue to start a reboot. Okay, so my installation is restarted my Linux virtual machine. I'm just waiting for it to log itself in and restart. Okay, I have to put my username and password in. So your username and password should be root for the username, and the password is the password that you set up when you ran the installer, the one I said to make sure you don't forget. All right, so I'm going to use the default config. And there we go. So I now have my Kali Linux installed. So from here, I'd be able to click on applications, and we can use these various tools that come with Kali Linux. But really, for the most part, we're going to use the terminal emulator. So when you click on terminal emulator, that's going to bring up a terminal, and you'll be able to run commands. For example, if I want to see if I have an IP address, I'm going to type ifconfig, and you can see that I do. My address is 10.0.2.15. I'm going to check to see if I can get to the internet. I'm just going to type ping google.com and see if that works. And it does. I'm able to ping Google. So that means I must be connected to the internet, which is good because we'll need the internet for some of these exercises. If you're not able to get to the internet or you don't get an IP address running those commands, be sure to let me know so we can figure out why. You can certainly try to troubleshoot on your own, but if you get stuck, let us know and we'll see if we can help you figure that out. If you do a ping, to stop it, you're going to hit Control-C. That's an interrupt. And there's a bunch of other commands. For example, who am I? Tells me who I'm logged in as. LS shows me the directories in my current directory. I can print PWD to see my current working directory. Lots of different commands. This is just Linux. So if you're familiar with Linux, of course, you can use all the same commands. This is just a Linux distribution. So once you've completed this, you can shut down your machine until we need it later on in the semester. So to shut down the machine, I'm just going to type shutdown -N. Oops, this version doesn't support that, so we'll just do shutdown. And eventually it'll shut itself down. You could also do, sometimes you can go init 0, which will shut down your system as well. And that's it. So once your machine is installed, you should be good to go. So when we need our Linux machines later on, you'll have it ready. You want to turn in a screenshot of your running Kali Linux distro, just so I know that it's working for everyone before we get to the next phase in the course. That way everybody's caught up. If you have any questions, let me know. Thank you.